They built their dream house 6 inches on my land, and that 6 inches ended up costing them more than $100,000. Not because I woke up one morning itching for a fight, and not because I wanted to ruin anybody's dream, but because sometimes the smallest line in the dirt is the only thing standing between being respected and being walked over. My name is Daniel Harper, and I own a long, skinny 5-acre strip just outside a little place called Mill Creek Hollow, about an hour from Nashville. My dad bought that parcel back in 1987 for $48,000. Thought he was crazy for paying that much, and to him it felt like security, like a quiet place. You put things that matter. It runs back to a shallow creek that dries most summers. Nothing glamorous, just oaks and cedar brush and red clay under your boots and a gravel drive that sounds like home when you pull in. I never built anything fancy, just a modest cabin I fixed up and a workshop where I mess with old engines. The property lines were marked with those iron stake surveyor's pounds, so you can't miss them. Everything recorded at the county office. Out here, that's sacred. For years, I didn't have neighbors. The lot next to me sat empty trees and weeds and deer tracks. Then Evan and Claire moved in. Young couple, early 30s city types who wanted the rural reset, showed up in a spotless black SUV like it had never seen mud, Claire, with one of those wide-brim hats you see in magazines, Evan trying too hard to look folksy. They said the usual neighborly things. "Hey, we're building our forever home. We've been dreaming about this." I nodded. I don't begrudge dreams. I just know how expensive dreams get when they don't respect the reality on the ground. They cleared trees, big equipment rolled in concrete trucks, flagging tape, the whole circus. Every day there was noise, backup beeps, men shouting measurements, and every night Claire posted about it online, making it cinematic, clearing the land, breaking ground, honoring the land, she'd say, holding a coffee mug like it was a prop in the narrative. I'd laugh about it with my sister when she sent me the links, but the laugh didn't last. One afternoon I went out for my usual walk along the boundary habit more than anything, and my chest tightened before my brain caught up. Their foundation corner crossed the iron stake not by feet or yards, but by about 6 inches. 6 inches of concrete sitting on land that wasn't theirs. I stood there longer than I'd like to admit, staring at that gray edge as if it had committed some personal crime. You could shrug, I suppose. 6 inches sounds almost comical. You lose 6 inches in a haircut, who cares? But lines on land aren't jokes. They're law. They're respect. I walked over to where Evan was standing, blueprint in hand, looking like he'd been born to smile at cameras. "Got a minute?" I asked. He smiled that practiced smile and said, "Sure," and I pointed. He pulled out his phone, zoomed a satellite image, swiped like an app could replace a surveyor. "See," he said, "we're fine." The app showed colored lines that meant nothing against iron stakes hammered into the earth. "Those apps are off by 10, 15 feet sometimes," I told him. He chuckled it off. "Stake shift. We had someone look when we bought it, though. When I asked if they got a licensed survey, he hesitated. They'd relied on county records, not a current survey. They'd already poured." That "not hurting anything" line, I still hear it. It's not hurting anything. It shifted something in me from calm to warning. The forms came off, framing went up, and that 6 inches hardened into permanence. I went back with the county surveys folded under my arm, thinking we'd have that small town moment where two grown adults look at the same paper, nod, and fix the problem before it gets ugly. They didn't nod. Evan's contractor, Marty, a thick guy who looked like he'd built half the county, laughed under his breath. Claire kept filming, narrating about reclaimed wood and intentional design. Her phone always pointed at the camera like it was narrating a life that excluded the messy parts. Evan offered to adjust the line pay for a boundary amendment slide 6 inches over, even offered $1,000 for the trouble. $1,000 for land my father paid $48,000 for before Evan was out of middle school. I told him no, it wasn't for sale. He called me unreasonable. That word hung there like humidity before a storm. I left without another word, but I didn't sleep. I ran through all the reasons to let it go. Nobody would notice. I don't plan to build right on that exact line. But boundaries are about more than usefulness, they're about limits. If you let one slide because it's small, you teach people your limits are flexible. I've learned the hard way what happens when you let people inch past your lines. A week later, still no correction. So I called a lawyer, Margaret Collins, late 50s, sharp as broken glass, the kind of attorney who doesn't waste words. We did it the proper way: written notice, formal demand to cease construction and remedy the encroachment. Construction didn't stop. Instead, a letter came back from their attorney, polished and sure the encroachment was minimal. No material harm forcing demolition would be unconscionable. In plain English, we built first, and we'll argue later. They offered $5,000 for a permanent easement. An easement legal permission to leave that bit of structure on my land forever. $5,000. Margaret looked at me and said, if we accepted, it was done. That strip would never come back. I stared at the ceiling and felt nothing heroic, only tired. Still, we filed suit. Not because I wanted to ruin anyone, but because I couldn't hand over my land with a shrug and a handshake. While motions were filed and depositions scheduled, they finished the house. Wraparound porch string lights landscaping the whole Instagram-friendly tableau, and Claire's online posts painted them as brave and inspiring. Meanwhile, I was paying hourly legal fees and walking past that corner every day feeling like it leaned into my yard on purpose. 4 months into the lawsuit, Evan came over looking worn. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "You could have stopped it before the concrete dried," I replied. He told me they'd sunk almost $800,000 into the house, that the lender was nervous. "It's 6 inches," he said. "It's my 6 inches." I told him it was my land. The case dragged on 8 months. Surveyors confirmed what I'd been saying from day one, 6 inches over the line, clear as daylight. Margaret built the argument clean. Notice had been given. Construction continued. That choice mattered. The hearing day arrived gray and cold. The courtroom wasn't dramatic the way TV makes it look, just fluorescent lights, a judge who had seen every version of this story before, and paperwork stacked like a small mountain. Judge Holbrook listened. Their attorney argued equity and hardship, how tearing down a structural corner would be devastating, how investors and lenders and community impact mattered. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She pointed to the facts, timeline, notice, deliberate continuation. The judge asked Evan when he had first been informed. "Before the slab was fully cured," he admitted. "And you continued?" the judge asked. Evan had no tidy answer. "A week later, we got the ruling. The court found willful negligence, not an accident, not a misunderstanding, willful negligence because they had been warned and chose to proceed. The judge determined that without rights to that 6-inch strip, the structure was technically non-compliant. He gave them 2 options. Pay $75,000 in damages to purchase a permanent easement plus my legal fees, or enter into an onerous annual easement agreement at $20,500 per year in perpetuity. Margaret let the numbers sit. My legal fees were just over $18,000. When Margaret called me, I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at the trees. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I surprised myself. Tired. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just tired. Evan tried to negotiate, argue the valuation was punitive, that it exceeded market value. The judge didn't budge. The defendants elected to assume risk when they proceeded after notice, he wrote. The consequences are not punitive. They are the natural result of that choice. A few weeks later, Evan came back alone, no contractor, no lawyer. He looked older, quieter. "We're taking the lump sum," he said. $75,000 plus fees wired within 30 days. They covered the survey, the recording fees, everything. By the time the county stamps hit the files, the total cost to them topped $103,000. 6 inches cost more than some people's down payment. The irony is strange. I didn't feel richer. The land looked the same. That corner of their house still sits where it sits now, with legal permission filed and permanent. Claire posts less now, and when she does, the captions are quieter, less poetic. We nod when we pass on the road. Sometimes I walk out to that iron stake and rest my boot against it just to remind myself it's still there, still where it was when my father put it in the ground. People in town have opinions, of course. Some say I was right, property rights matter. You can't let people assume they can encroach and then negotiate later. Others call me stubborn, say I could have taken $5,000 and moved on, that neighbors should compromise. Maybe they're not wrong. Maybe pride played a part. I thought about that a lot late at night. But there's a difference between pride and principle. You can lose the first and keep the second, or vice versa. What I learned, what keeps coming back to me, is simple boundaries only work if they're real. If you let a line blur because it's just a little thing, you teach the world your limits are elastic. That doesn't always end in a courtroom, but sometimes it does. And sometimes the price for assuming others won't notice or won't care is far higher than anyone expected. So I'll leave you with this. I'm not telling you to be hard-hearted or to take joy in other people's mistakes. I'm saying be clear about what's yours and don't let people presume to redraw your lines. Was I defending what was mine, or did I let pride turn 6 inches into a war? I'd actually like to hear what you think. Tell me about a time somebody crossed your line and how you handled it. Did you let it slide or did you push back? Drop your thoughts below or tell someone you trust over coffee. I read more of those stories than you'd think. They helped me make sense of this one.